field mouse just crushed a concrete foundation into powder. At the same moment, across the world, a 5-ton elephant floated away into the clouds like a child's lost balloon. Natural laws have not simply been broken, they have been rewritten by something microscopic, something that treats the fundamental forces of the universe as a buffet. This is the reality of the emergence of the gravity worms, a phenomenon that has left the global scientific community in a state of silent paralysis. It began as an anomaly in the heart of the sub-Saharan plains, where rangers reported seeing strange gray masses hovering near the horizon. At first, they were mistaken for unusual cloud formations or heat mirages, until binoculars revealed the truth. Dozens of African elephants were drifting upward, their massive legs kicking helplessly against the air, their trunks reaching for a ground that no longer pulled them back. They didn't look like they were flying. They looked like they had been discarded by the Earth itself, cast off into the blue. Thousands of miles away in the industrial districts of Northern Europe, a different kind of nightmare was unfolding beneath the floorboards. Construction crews began reporting catastrophic structural failures in brand new buildings. Steel beams were buckling, and reinforced concrete was snapping for no apparent reason. When the source was finally uncovered, it defied every known metric of biology. A single common rat, no larger than a human hand, was found at the center of a collapsed basement. When the recovery team attempted to move the creature, their heavy-duty equipment stalled. The rat, though biologically intact and appearing perfectly normal, possessed the effective mass of a main battle tank. It wasn't just heavy, it was a localized gravitational singularity wrapped in fur. The ground beneath it had turned to a fine, pressurized dust, and the very air seemed to hum with a low-frequency vibration. The culprit is believed to be a parasitic organism now colloquially known as the gravity worm. These are not worms in the traditional sense, but rather biological conduits that seem to interact with the Higgs field on a cellular level. They do not consume the host's flesh or organs in the way a typical virus might. Instead, they feast on the host's relationship with the Earth's pull. They are the ultimate cosmic hijackers, recalibrating the way matter interacts with space-time. Some hosts become what researchers call anchors, their density increasing exponentially until their own skeletal structure should, by all rights, turn to powder. Yet, the parasite reinforces the host's internal lattice with a crystalline density, allowing a creature the size of a squirrel to weigh as much as a locomotive. Other hosts become drifters, their mass shedding away until they are lighter than the air they breathe. For these victims, a light breeze is a one-way ticket to the upper atmosphere, a permanent departure from the world of the living. The visual evidence smuggled out of restricted zones is deeply unsettling and points to a world losing its grip. There are recordings of heavy zones where the grass has been crushed into a glass-like sheen by the weight of passing insects. In these areas, birds do not land. They plummet. A sparrow infected with the anchor variant hits the ground with the force of a falling anvil, leaving a crater in the dirt and sending a shockwave through the surrounding soil. Conversely, in the light zones, the very trees seem to struggle to stay rooted. Leaves don't fall. They drift upward, coating the underside of forest canopies like a green, rustling ceiling. The animals caught in this shift exhibit a haunting sort of grace, or a terrifying lack of it. A drifting leopard moves through the trees like a ghost, barely touching the branches, while an anchored stray dog creates a rhythmic thud that can be felt through the soles of your shoes from a block away. The terror isn't just in the physical transformation, but in the total unpredictability of the infection. There is no clear indicator of which way the scale will tip until the shift begins. One day, a person might feel a slight spring in their step, a sense of euphoria, as if the world has become a little less demanding, a little more supportive. By the next morning, they might find themselves clutching the furniture to avoid hitting the ceiling as their mass evaporates into nothingness. Or worse, they might wake up and find they cannot move their limbs, not because of paralysis, but because their arm now weighs 400 pounds. The bed frame groans, the floorboards scream, and the slow, agonizing descent through the levels of the house begins. It is a quiet, heavy descent that no one can stop. A journey toward the center of the earth that ends in a tomb of one's own making. In Johannesburg, a 34-year-old mother named Aisha woke up unable to lift her own baby. At first, she thought it was a sudden onset of muscle fatigue or perhaps a neurological glitch. But as the minutes passed, her own body began to betray her. By evening, her footsteps were cracking the tiles of her kitchen floor. She tried to sit on her sofa, only for the wooden frame to explode into splinters beneath her. By midnight, she had sunk through the floorboards and was resting on the concrete foundation of her apartment building.
It's breaking, watch out!
Rescue teams arrived, but their stretchers snapped and their hydraulic lifts hissed in failure. She is still there today, conscious and vocal, but effectively fused to the earth, a living monument of impossible weight that no crane can budge. Her story is not unique. It is becoming the new reality for thousands. In Berlin, the story of 9-year-old Lukas serves as the terrifying counterpart. He was at a park, playing with a simple helium balloon, when his feet began to lose their connection to the grass. His mother initially laughed, thinking he was jumping with incredible agility, until she realized he wasn't coming back down. She grabbed his ankle at the last second, but the pull upward was relentless, as if an invisible hook was reeling him into the sky. Other parents rushed to help, creating a human chain to hold him down, but the air around him seemed to thin and warm. Eventually, the force became too much. Lukas drifted upward, his small hand still reaching out, until he became a tiny dot against the blue expanse, and then disappeared altogether into the upper atmosphere. He is part of a growing number of the lost, those who the Earth simply refused to hold.
We're losing containment in
Reports
Sector
from the front
Reroute
lines of the
power now.
containment effort suggest that the worms are not just random mutations. There is a terrifying efficiency to how they spread and where they choose to settle. They seem to thrive in high-density urban environments where the structural consequences of their presence are most devastating. A single, heavy human in a high-rise apartment building is a death sentence for everyone living below them. We are seeing accounts of the static statues, individuals who have become so dense they have effectively become part of the geological strata. They sit in chairs that have fused with the floor, in rooms that have sunk 3 feet into the earth, unable to be moved by any conventional means. They are alive, they are conscious, but they are anchored to a single point in space with a force that defies explanation. The global response has been one of hushed desperation and carefully managed narratives. There are no public service announcements about biological gravity shifts. There are only structural safety inspections that result in entire city blocks being cordoned off without warning. The official story often speaks of localized seismic instability, atmospheric density pockets, or ancient gas leaks causing hallucinations. But the footage of floating livestock and flattened forests tells a different story. People have begun to notice the small signs that the world is changing. The way a neighbor's footsteps suddenly sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. The way a child's toy doesn't just bounce, but hits the floor with a metallic ring that vibrates through the entire house. The world is becoming a place where the ground is no longer a certainty, and the sky is a vacuum, waiting to claim anything that loses its grip. The most disturbing aspect of the gravity worm phenomenon is the silence. Because the parasite affects mass rather than physical appearance, an infected host looks exactly the same until they move. You could be standing next to an anchor variant on a subway platform, and you wouldn't know until the train arrived and the vibration caused the floor beneath them to give way. You could be holding the hand of a drifter variant, only to have them slip from your grasp and accelerate into the clouds like a mannequin. There is no fever, no cough, no outward sign of the biological hijacking taking place within the cells. There is only the sudden, violent realization that the rules of weight and measure have been discarded. It is a lottery where the prize is either a permanent anchor or a terminal ascent. In the rural outskirts, where the infection has hit wildlife hardest, the landscape has taken on a surreal, dreamlike quality that borders on the divine and the horrific. Woods are filled with hanging deer, caught in the high branches of trees after drifting upward and becoming entangled. Lakes are being drained not by drought, but because the fish have become so heavy they are crushing the ecosystem at the bottom of the basin, turning the mud into a compacted, lifeless stone. The natural order is being inverted. The small are becoming the heavy, and the massive are becoming the ethereal. Predators that once relied on weight to pin their prey now find themselves floating away during a strike, while the prey becomes an immovable object that shatters the predator's teeth upon impact. The question that keeps researchers awake in their shielded bunkers is not just how this is happening, but why. Is this a natural evolutionary pivot, a way for life to colonize the air or survive the crushing depths of high-gravity planets? Or is it something more sinister? Some theorize that the gravity worms are harvesters, concentrating mass in specific locations for a purpose we cannot yet comprehend. Perhaps they are building something, using the living bodies of animals and humans as the raw material for a gravitational construction project that will eventually alter the orbit of the planet itself. The heavy zones are getting larger, and the drifters are being spotted further and further out in the upper atmosphere. Silent sentinels of a changing world, their bodies preserved by the cold and the lack of oxygen. The psychological toll on the survivors is immense. In the affected zones, people have developed a new kind of agoraphobia. They fear the open sky, not because of what might fall from it, but because they might fall into it. They wear weighted vests and lead-soled shoes, a desperate attempt to stay tethered to a world that seems increasingly eager to let them go. Others live in constant fear of the sink, the moment when their own body decides to become an anchor. They avoid upper floors, they sleep on ground-level concrete slabs, and they listen. They listen for the sound of the world cracking under its own new weight, the sound of the floorboards beginning to groan under a burden they were never meant to carry. There are stories whispered in the dark corners of the internet of the Singularity People. These are individuals who have reached such an extreme state of density that light itself seems to bend around them, creating a shimmering, distorted halo. They move with a slow, tectonic deliberation. Every footstep a thunderclap, every gesture a feat of impossible strength. They are the new monuments of the earth, beings who have transitioned from biological entities to geological forces. And then there are the cloud dwellers, the ones who were caught by the wind and never came down. Pilots report seeing them drifting in the jet stream, tiny specks of humanity suspended miles above the earth. A permanent orbit of the lost that circles the globe in a silent, freezing parade. As the infection continues to migrate, the very architecture of our lives is being forced to adapt. New buildings are being designed with mass distribution foundations, and public spaces are being equipped with overhead tethers and safety nets for those who might suddenly find themselves buoyant. But these are temporary fixes for a permanent shift in the nature of reality. we are witnessing the end of the era of constant gravity. We are entering a time where your weight is as fluid as your mood, and the ground beneath your feet is a luxury, not a right. The gravity worms are not just parasites. They are the new architects of our existence, and they are building a world where the only thing we can be sure of is that nothing is as heavy or as light as it seems. The mystery of their origin remains unsolved. Some suggest they arrived on a meteorite, a hitchhiker from a high-gravity world seeking a new place to feed and expand. Others believe they have always been here, hidden deep in the Earth's mantle, and have only now been stirred by our deep-crust drilling and environmental shifts. Whatever the case, they are here now, and they are invisible until the moment of crisis. They are in the water, in the soil, and perhaps in the very air we breathe. They are waiting to find a new host, waiting to decide if you will be the anchor that breaks the floor or the balloon that vanishes into the sun. The next time you feel a momentary bout of dizziness or a strange, unexplained heaviness in your limbs after a long day, do not dismiss it. Look at the ground. Check for microcracks in the pavement. Look at the birds in the sky and see if any of them are falling just a little too fast or rising without flapping their wings. The world is changing, 1 gram at a time, 1 ton at a time. We are no longer the masters of our own mass. We are merely the vessels for a force that is reimagining what it means to exist on this planet. The gravity worms are turning the world upside down, and for many of us, the descent, or the ascent, has already begun. Keep your feet on the ground as long as you can, because the Earth is starting to lose its grip, and the sky is very, very hungry.